Howdy, y'all. Now, me, I like to repeat myself. And that's why I make videos. That's how this whole thing started. Having to say the same thing like 100 times to 100 different people, or saying something and have somebody call me later because they forgot what I said. Uh, then I have to repeat myself. So instead, I start making videos for common things that tend to come up in my work all the time. And then next time somebody asks me that question, I just send them a link to the video, and it saves me a lot of time. So many have asked and keep asking about if I could talk about magical names. In witchcraft, it is quite common to have a magical name, a name for your witch persona, to separate your mundane life from your magical life. If you have a separation between your magical life and your mundane life, which I don't tend to have anymore. And in a lot of traditions, you have two. You have a public craft name, as it's called, and a private craft name. In some traditions, that name is bestowed, or that name or those names are bestowed upon you on initiation. In other systems, you pick them yourself. And over time, some people develop a long list of names, picking different names upon your path. And in some people that do that, it becomes like one long string of names. And usually that's like your private craft name or something like that. And in a way, it's kind of a controlled bipolarism. We give a name to a particular part of our personality. I'm going to close this fucking door. How about that? You give a name to that witch part of your persona. Then when you speak that name, or call that name, the witch persona kind of takes over. You become possessed by your magical self, or your higher self, or however you want to call it. It's the name. A name names have power. Now, I advise against, when this time comes for you, I advise against picking the name of a deity as your magical name. Picking a name of anything that previously exists attaches you to the mythos or the life, the energy of that being. I've met countless goth pagan girls that name themselves Persephone and have a really hard time around October 31st. If you don't understand that, then you look up Persephone and you see. Unless that deity had a perfect existence and everything went hunky-dory and fine for them, you might not want to pick the name of a deity. And this even goes for like naming animals after deities. You're going to attach the animal to that energy. Now, in my lifetime, I've developed a string of names, and they become names for different personas, different parts of myself. And I find that when I name them, and this might be how gods come to be too. When I name them, they take on a life of their own, and it's like a controlled bipolarism. You know, I'm not crazy. I'm doing this consciously to myself. Let's see. I think my first craft name was Demetrius. Then there was Ambrosius. Eventually, when the first witch store opened in Santa Cruz, I recognized when I got a job there right away. I recognized the importance of being the only witch store in a town, that people were going to come there as part of their spiritual path, and it was my sacred duty to know the different players in my community, know the different goings on, so I could send those seekers on their way. I was the first step on that path, a doorway, if you will. So I chose Birch. Birch, the Celtic doorway to the other world, the first letter in the tree alphabet. That's why I chose the name Birch. So you will hear me referred to as Birch out there. My given name is Michael Carell. Since Facebook came along, I started using that. And in one of my more recent paths in Palo Mayombe, you use your legal name. until you're given your initiatory name. I can't speak much on that, but I can say that when I received that name, there's a certain part that's spoken publicly in your group, and then there's a certain part of the name you leave out, and you don't say the whole name just to everybody. That kind of becomes the name that you're known to the gods and spirits as. Same thing in witchcraft. Your private craft name becomes the name you're known as by the gods. And there's a belief that if somebody doesn't have your full magical name, it makes it quite difficult for them to do damage to you. And the belief is, the gods don't know who the hell that is. I don't know how much credence I can put in that because, they're gods. I think they should know who I am. They should know who you are. They should know all your names. So anyways, there's Birch. There's Michael Carell I'm now using, so that's not really my magical name, but I have no mundane life, so I guess that's a magical name now. And then there's Phil. You'll hear a lot of people call me Phil. You hear a lot of people still calling me Uncle Phil. Phil was originally a pen name of mine that I wrote poetry and short stories and things under the name Phil Free, which is a name that I borrowed from one of the lead singers of Crass, one of the original anarchist punk bands of my generation. I took that in honor of my ancestors in anarchism. Now, Phil Free took on a whole life of his own. Phil Free became a musician, had an entire musical career of mostly protest songs, rousing the rabble at protests and functions all around the country. Became an Earth First activist, Earth First singer, joined the IWW, the Industrial Workers of the World, sang a lot there. Became my job to rouse the rabble with the guitar a lot. Phil Free also started or helped start one of the longest running, actually the longest running pirate radio station in the country, Free Radio Santa Cruz. It's still out there, still functioning. I retired a few years ago. You can hear them at freakradio.org. Phil Free became just like a revolutionary force, way beyond me. I could not control what Phil Free did, probably because Phil Free was an anarchist. So I now have many names. Now there's Birch, Phil Free, there's old craft names. Originally, I think when I joined the craft in the Druidic Craft of the Wise when I was a kid, my name was Igor. And that wasn't necessarily a craft name, that was what I was known. And that come about because my two best friends were named Mike. And we hung out and then people started calling us the Miketeers. So we all chose different names. There was Mike Pope, Mike Fisher. So it was Pope, Fish, and Igor. And we were no longer the Miketeers. And it was a scary little darkly clad black eye makeup wearing. This is way before goth ever came about. It was a subsection of punk rock called death rock, I guess. And so he was already a spooky little guy when he got into witchcraft. So that was like my original name. By the time I came to craft, I'd already been used to being known by many names. Now, the reason that I told you my whole story is, well, I understand the reasoning behind the craft names. When you become a public figure, like I kind of ended up being, it really can muddy the waters. It really can confuse the hell out of things because people don't know who the hell I am. And I've run into that recently. I was on Candelo's Corner, and somebody they were asking about my original parent organization, the Druidic Craft of the Wise, and they mentioned somebody. Well, then you must know Hyperion. I go, oh yeah, I know I know of a Hyperion, and that was a craft name that was used in that tradition. And in that tradition, you only used your craft name. They went all the way back to they believed that they had once been hiding during the burning times, and so they had these names to so that the Christians couldn't find out who they were. So he told me, well, that's Hyperion. So you knew Hyperion? I go, yeah, I know of Hyperion. And they go, well, that's Eddie. And I go, oh, yeah, I've heard of this Eddie. People have been talking about this Eddie guy in the hoodoo communities recently, who had passed. And I said, well, yeah, well, that's Dr. E. And of course, I'd heard who Dr. E was. And so there was that confusion in another person. Here's this guy had three different names, and I'd been, he was like family from my parent tradition, and I didn't know because of the obscurity of the different names. Now, I have three or four different Facebook accounts now. I got a Birch Tree public figure. I got Michael Correll. I've got a cyber witchcraft course. I've got the Unity of Wicca and Witchcraft. Yeah, that's me too. And then other ones. I got one for my shop. I got one for my tradition, the Circle A system. You can't see that. That's private. There's one for the students of my shop. So I really have to be busy on social media to keep up with all my names and all my different categories and compartments and blah, 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 blah. So hopefully that teaches you something. I don't know what that rant's really about. I wanted to explain the magical names, explain the significance, how they're used, and how they can really, too much magical names can really become confusing. My son is 4 years old, and you ask him, what's Papa's name? Well, it takes him a while. He knows all the names, but it's confusing as hell. I've got a daughter who's 18. I imagine it was confusing as hell for her life because most of the time I was known as Phil then. That was my name around Santa Cruz. Most people knew me as Phil Free. In fact, my wife's whole family still calls me Phil. Not that many people using the name Phil anymore. So, names have power. Names can take on their own energies, their own persona. And I kind of think that teaches us some things about how the gods operate or how the gods are created. Once we take off a piece of the whole, the Godhead, if you will, separate it from the Godhead, give it a name, call upon it for certain things, that thing takes on a life of its own. So in that context, it can maybe perhaps be said that humans create the gods and the gods create humans. It's a circular thing. Hopefully this rant had something in it for you. Merry meet, merry part, merry meet again.